some of these articles are used to prove that they mean the reboot in the sense of, and when I say reboot, what I mean is by your contemporary, what most people view it as a whole new Bond, that there's a separate Bond or a separate timeline. And that, but there's a few articles out there that are used to prove this, and they use the phrase reboot, but when you read the article in the context, it is not the same as the mainstream understanding, that it means, it's rather, there's quite a different meaning to it. So let's go and let's look at some of these. The first one is, it's an interview with Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson. It's on Games Radar, and it is October 6th, 2009. And this is the interviewer asks, so Bond is our reboot of the decade, and Barbara's response is, well, that's wonderful, thank you very much. I'm actually reading these quotes. I'm actually reading the interview, and one of these days I'll get pictures and I'll put them up. But you can go look at them. That's why I'm giving the references. And my response to that is this: Barbara's not giving an admittance that Bond is rebooted in that contemporary sense. What she's saying is, it's like a surprised gratitude, like, wow, thank you, that's a huge praise. And if you notice that this interview is post Quantum of Solace, so this is, it's not prior to their making or around the time they made it, these films, it's post. Next thing that the interviewer says is, of course, Bond has been rebooted before, say from the fantastical Moonraker to the more down-to-earth For Your Eyes Only. But with Die Another Day making a small fortune, what prompted the grittier approach? Barbara's response, well, September 11th happened and it felt inappropriate for the films to continue down that fantastical path. So we decided to move to a more serious Bond, and we had acquired the rights to Casino Royale in, when was it, Michael, 2000? And Michael's response is 1999, I think, and then Barbara says 1999, and of course that's the holy grail of the Bond books, the one that Cubby and Harry had wanted to start with, and the rights weren't available. I mean, you know the history. It's not been made particularly well either time, which they're referring to 1954 Casino Royale and the 1967. Continuing with Barbara, so we were working on another script and we kind of got stuck, and then Michael said, I really want to do Casino Royale, and I said, that's a great idea, let's do it. Okay. Now notice in this that the interviewer's definition of reboot is not coming up with a new Bond in regards to there being multiple Bonds. And the reason he's not, it wouldn't make sense, because the example he's using in his question, the two films are both Roger Moore. It's For Your Eyes Only and Moonraker. So clearly his idea of reboot is similar to my definition, that Bond is simply being transformed and his character given more depth, not changing the actual character into another James Bond character. And if you reflect on Barbara and Michael's definitions of definition of reboot, it's starting from Bond's beginnings and not making multiple characters named Bond. Continuing on, that interviewer says, were you always clear from the start that this would be a reboot of the franchise, a bit of clearing of the decks? Barbara says, as Michael said, we just decided that we would make it as if no Bond film had been made before, and we were lucky we had the novel. Of course, it was written in the 50s, so it had to be updated, so we called Rob and Neil, and they did a great draft. ... So it wasn't as if we were just starting all over again. Okay, notice how Barbara responds. She avoids the contemporary idea of what reboot is. She is bringing back the character to his origins to show us how Bond came to be, where he came from. And this next bit clarifies this. The interviewer says, if you had one overriding aim or priority for the film, what would you say it was? Barbara says, well, I think it's about the character, you know. It's the first time you really get to understand the inner makings of Bond. Events happen which define him. It's his journey, his chrysalis. He comes out the other end a completely transformed human being. So you see, Barbara is referring to the character as a whole, one single James Bond. In short, she's telling us how Connery through Brosnan became the Bond he is, shown through Craig. And then Barbara says, Cubby and Harry wanted to make Casino Royale for a long time. It's the first, the one that defines the character. We decided to make it then. And because of what is going on in the world, again, the roots of this has been in a long-time desire of the franchise to make a Bond background once they obtained the rights. The interviewer then says, okay, what about Bond himself? No, you've introduced the character with more layers. Is that likely to be a constant thread for the foreseeable future? And Barbara says, I hope so. That's what we're aiming for. He explores his vulnerabilities. Part of the excitement is about not just having Bond go through the physical challenges, but the emotional ones as well. So we see that the interviewer, he shifted his wording from reboot to reintroduction with more layers, which is confirmed by Barbara. We don't have a different character, but rather a character with depth. We get to know him more, and we discover things about him we didn't know before, but it's the same person. It's the same as getting to know people in real life. The more you are around them, the more you get to know them. All right, there's a second interview with Barbara and Michael by first showing, and it was November 9th, 2012. So this is right before Skyfall. Start out, the interviewer asks, what is the biggest inspiration for why you decided to reinvent and reboot that character with Daniel Craig and with what it is now? Barbara says, we were able to get the rights to Casino Royale, which had eluded Cubby and Harry originally. That was the film they obviously wanted to make. So we are very lucky to get those rights back. Notice how Barbara and Michael, they never say reboot. They always refer to giving the same character depth and the desire of the family and the franchise to producing Casino Royale in the past. In fact, the interviewer in his introduction doesn't say reboot. He says how they've reinvented and refreshed this beloved spy character. I think Bond being refreshed is a better, more appropriate term because they're all one single Bond. Moving on, the interviewer asks, how much are you going to continue to reinvent and reboot Bond from this point forward? And this point forward, they're right before Skyfall at this time. If it's going to progress from there with the same elements, or is it going to be something completely new each time? Michael says, I think we'll have to wait. The Bond films have waxed and waned. And then Barbara, but that's always the challenge, to make the next one as good as it can be. It's been a challenge. Cubby and Harry had before us. It's really hard. Now we have the family back. I think it will be a reincarnation of the original. Having those characters isn't going to make Bond comfortable as he was in the past, because the reinvention of those characters are very different. So I think it want to be just the casual kind of relationship. It won't be just the casual kind of relationships anymore. Again, the interviewer tries to make an attempt at reboot, but again, Michael and Barbara avoid the term and go for reincarnation and reinvention. But notice that they don't even apply these terms to Bond himself, but rather the idea of the reintroduction, a better term, of the characters that support Bond are brand new, such as QM and Moneypenny, which aren't the same as the old characters. Again, keeping Craig the same as the other Bonds. Though I have room to believe that Moneypenny is the same, though it's a code name. After this comment, they talk about supporting actors for a while. And that's the end of the interview. So, and then there's an interview there's two interviews by Martin Campbell. The first one is found on IGN, and it was from October 19th, 2005. The interviewer asked, and he's talking about the new movie Casino Royale. He says, does it restart the franchise? And Martin Campbell says, yeah, I guess so. And okay, I'll stop right here and I'll mention that Martin isn't sure of this. He's not saying a definite yes, it's more of an avoidance. Because if you notice, this is before Casino Royale was underway. Casino Royale started getting underway at the end of January 2006, and this is in 2005. I'll show you this in the next question and in the next interview, that they weren't restarting as in reboot, but rather starting from the beginning. It's not a new Bond, once again. I'm reiterating this a lot, I know. But starting at the beginning, which they've always wanted to do from the beginning of the franchise, but they just haven't been able to legally until now. Alright, next the interviewer says, does this mean you start remaking the other movies? Martin, no. This is the last book they are filming, because all the rest have been done. So we see here that they're not redoing these books or the old films, which suggests this is not a reboot. It suggests it's just starting from the beginning. And the interview goes on and he says, do you think a restart of Batman Begins had to do with this? Campbell says, no, I think they've always wanted to get the book and have not been able to till just recently. Now they have the book. Barbara said Cubby always wanted to make the book. It's exactly what I said above, that this isn't about Martin Campbell's, yeah, I guess so. He's elaborating on, no, it's not exactly restarting the whole thing. It's just going back. So, I'm just clarifying that there.